All right, y'all, we're back. I got done over there at table saw cutting a whole bunch of random widths of materials. We want to cut all kinds of different stuff. You do it about 1.5 inches wide because that's what the shims are, they're 1.5 inches wide. So we've cut a whole bunch of random widths of materials. I got 3/8, I got 5/8, I got 1/2 inch, I got 5/16 and 9/16. I got all different stuff. Well, we'll have to cut all this to length because we want to be able to put it up here and put it in our jam without having to cut it off. We're going to have to cut these off, which is not a big deal. We use the multi-tool, but if you can, why bother cutting them off? So these, we've got 4 9/16 in that frame as we talked about yesterday. So why not just cut them to say 4 inches? Then they're not sticking out in either way. We don't want them sticking out past the sheetrock. So what we've got to do is we've got to set it up on the chop saw. Well, the chop saw, as I've discussed in the past, you always set up your chop saw before you ever get started. Nobody comes up to this thing and just starts cutting just because they think it's good to go. You have to make sure that you're sitting on 0 degrees on this table right here. Make sure it's sitting in, and you just will push it down and lock it in. This button is actually for locking it in odd spaces, whereas it's got auto stops at certain degrees left and right. So I'm going to let it drop into 0 and I'm going to go ahead and lock it in. Well, at the same time, I need to make sure that nobody has tilted this one way or the other where this is out of perfect. I don't want it to be left or right. I want it to be dead on 0. So I'm going to put it on 0 and it has an automatic stop and it's going to lock itself in. So that's what I've done there. Check this to make sure. And again, because you don't know who was on the saw last. They might have this thing sitting over here at 2 degrees and been cutting something. You don't want to take that chance. So always check it. We talked about the arms that come out on this, and this new saw, you push this down and it brings this out. And it's very important that we set this thing so that it's perfectly in line with the table. Because if I'm going to have something being supported out here, I want it so that it's sitting perfectly. Now this one here, that side is good. I can use a straight edge, I can use a level, I can use a straight edge, I can use whatever I want, and I can put that on there. I'm not messing with the blade right now, so I'm not unplugged. But if I was messing with the blade, I'm going to unplug it. But I've got this stop in all the way, or this arm in all the way as a support because I'm not cutting anything long at this time. I'm going to be cutting short things. But regardless, if I'm running the way out here, I want to make sure that I've got it so this is sitting right on. At that far distance there, it's got a little bit of play to it. So I would want to raise this up to a point that it's actually supporting it where it's sitting perfectly on the table right there. This here is so you can flip it up and you can actually drop this down and use this as a stop. We don't use this as a rest. We use it as a stop. Wherever I want to set up that stop, if this is where I want it, I'm going to raise it up so that it's still supporting my lumber at this point, but it's stopping my lumber there. So anytime that I'm making 2 or more cuts, consecutive cuts at the same exact length, I want to use a stop. So I've got my saw set up. This is perfectly in line with my bar here. I've got my stop set up. I can set my stop up to whatever length I want it to be to make multiple cuts. We always hold the board on the side that you have your stop. If not, if I have it over here and I'm holding this side and I come through, now I've got this piece of wood wedged between the stop and my blade, which is going to cause some ugly things to happen as this gets sideways and gets twisted up in the blade. So I am right-handed, and I always hold with my left, use the saw with my right. So I'm going to drop this down, and I'm going to use the other side as my fence. So I'm going to come over here. This one is not adjusted properly. It needs to come up to the point that it's touching my wood, holding it onto the table just so that I'm sitting in contact with my table and my fence at all times, and my arm out here, my rest. So it's sitting perfectly flat. Now if I wanted to use it as a stop, I'm going to do the other knob, and I raise my stop fence up, and then I can use it as a stop. Before I use it as a stop, I want to make sure that I've got a clean edge, a clean end that I'm bumping to. You always want to go ahead and nip that end off before you start using it. But I would have it nipped, I would come in, and I'd start making my cuts. Now the ones we just talked about, we said we're going to use them at about 4 inches, so we're going to cut a whole pile of these things at 4 inches because that's all we need. Now the shims we leave long length because we're using them beside each other. We're shimming them in and out, those tapered shims. But we'll just set up a box like this. We'll set it down and we'll just start cutting material. Now this is a piece of 3/4 scrap that was just laying around. I think it actually came off the back of one of the doors as a temporary support for the door. We can use this piece of 3/4 because there's places we need 3/4 material. A piece of 3/4 inch plywood is actually going to be a little bit thinner. A piece of 5/8 plywood is actually going to be a little bit thinner. 3/8, etc. All of them are going to be a little bit thinner. They call it 23 30 seconds, 19 30 seconds, 15 30 seconds. They're actually a touch small. So what we want to do, I'm not going to use a stop at this time because what I'm cutting is short. I'm going to come in and I'm always going to nip the end of my board. I'm going to get it proper, nice and clean. And in this case, I'm going to come in from my blade and I'm going to mark, put me a little mark down here at about 4 inches. Not rocket science, just something I can look at, and I know that I can hit that same mark over and over, and it'll be about 4 inches. So I take my board, I've got it supported properly, I've got it plugged in. I have already inspected my saw, my table, my fence, everything is proper, everything's locked in. My blade's in good shape, unlike the one on the table saw, which is worn out. This blade looks like it's pretty much brand new, so we're in good shape there. We've got a dust collector bag back here. It's just about full, but we'll go ahead and we'll nip this off. Now we want to keep our fingers 6 inches away from that blade at all times. So if I'm cutting something at 4 inches, is it possible for me to cut it on this saw? No, because it's 6 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the 4 inches off of something longer. You never take your hand off the saw until it has stopped spinning. This particular saw is a sliding miter. There is no need for y'all to be sliding it in and out when you're cutting something small. Just use it as a chop saw and come down. I've cleaned that edge off. I want to make sure my table is clean. I'm in contact with my table and fence the whole time. Put it right in my 4 inch mark. And hold on to that thing until it's completely stopped. This saw is set up with an automatic brake. I'm going to take them and I'm going to drop them in there. Now at times, we'll get a little bit froggy and we do things that we really shouldn't do, which would be to cut this in half and stack it up, and then I'm cutting 2 at a time, and then stack it again and I'm cutting 4 at a time. But y'all aren't getting paid by the hour, so just come right on over here. You can waste your entire day doing this. And I would continue on with those 3/4 inch blocks until I'm done. Over here, I've got some blocks that I kept cut at 5/8 of an inch, and we're going to take and cut some of these. We're going to cut a whole bunch of these, and we're going to set them in the box, and everybody's going to be getting them at random. This one's a little bit longer or a little bit shorter. That would require me to hold it right here. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to take that and we'll cut it off with a multi-tool. So we're going to go through and we're going to cut these things. We've got 3/8, we've got 1/2 inch, we've got 9/16, we've got all different sizes of shims and blocks that we can use. We're going to cut them all, we're going to put them in the box, and as we need them, we're going to get them out and we'll put them up there. So I'm going to finish cutting some of these up. I'll finish filling my bucket, and when we come back, we'll go ahead and see if we can't install this door. Have a good day.